So let me begin by thanking Dean Alfredo Artiles for a great introduction and the invitation to be here for this occasion, the 80th anniversary year of graduate education at Arizona State University, which I think is an amazing time for me to be able to talk about some ideas that I have. I'd also like to join him in thanking his staff who've treated me very well from the very beginning of the process. Thank you all for working with me. I will jump right to it because he has me on a timer, and I want to be, get through this as best I can. So I entitled this talk, Disruptive Graduate Education in the Democratic Project. But let me begin first by sharing with you briefly a story. It starts very early in my life. I recall it watching both of my parents sit at a table after a full day's work and working through homework assignments because they both were in college, undergrad, and graduate school. And I thought it was just really amazing that they could do that, work and then go to school at the same time and have children. And I started to begin to see something that I'm going to refer to as a compact unfolding before my eyes. And when I went to high school and it was time for me to transition to go to undergraduate education, I remember asking many of my teachers that were my favorites, where did you go to college? And I heard things, because I'm from Chicago, like, oh, I attended the University of Illinois at Chicago, or I attended Eastern Illinois University, or the University of Kentucky, or the University of Illinois. And it started to dawn on me a little bit about this compact because I had been so moved by these individuals who had taught me, and they had all attended these public institutions. And then I went off to one myself and had great mentors, people who invested in me so that I could teach and engage in research even as an undergraduate. And it was an amazing experience. People told me it was not possible to have that kind of experience in a public regional undergraduate university. But I had it. And social mobility is what our sociology friends call it. They moved me on to additional graduate education at another regional public school, and I had many fine mentors there, and this compact started to crystallize in my mind. How was I able to do this from where I had come to that particular place? But these people invested in me in such a way that was amazing and pushed me on to doctoral education at a flagship state institution in what we call the AAU. And I had mentors there who said, you could be a professor. You could even be a professor in the Big Ten. It was amazing to me, and I actually became one and moved off to the University of Wisconsin, where this notion about the compact was fully crystallized in my mind. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it. If you haven't gathered what I'm saying fully, I'm going to just say that this compact is foundational to everything about graduate education. But let me say, I started off by saying my talk was really about disruption. And we often think about disruption as a negative thing, but I think my life has been about disruption. It was completely disrupted by this compact, and I actually had a chance to learn and grow as a researcher and a scholar. Education itself is disruptive. And so I want to start by saying to disrupt or to upset or to interrupt is, first pass, it may appear as it's a negative disturbance. However, in higher education, we accept disruption with glee and great fanfare. Think big gifts. For example, last month it was announced that Arizona State University will receive $50 million in donations to fund the advancement of research for dementia. Disruption. This gift provides an opportunity to interrupt old plans or to expand in ways that could not have been imagined prior to the gift. And research might disrupt, the research that might unfold from this will disrupt this horrible disease. One of the first gifts endowing a professorship was awarded to advance the theological mission of Cambridge University. Now you might say, what does that have to do with anything? Well, research, funding, disruption, they all go together. And the first gift that I was able to see at a British university was done at Cambridge University. And it was given to someone that held an endowed chair called the Lady Margaret Chair and his name was John Fisher, and he represented one of the important roles that unfolded at that time. He also served as the Bishop of Rochester, England, the Chancellor of Cambridge University, and unfortunately for him, advisor to King Henry VIII. And in his capacity, which is well chronicled given King Henry's history with women, he wouldn't have made it through the Me Too movement. He was awful. He divorced, and he caused all kind of major ethical and moral failures to unfold. But John Fisher, the Lady Margaret professor, took a public stand against the king's effort to declare his marriage to Queen Catherine null and void. His public position based on canon, principle, ethics, and moral conviction cost the first holder of the Lady Margaret professorship at Cambridge University his life, beheaded for ethical proclamation. I offer this tale to make 3 points. Point 1, the compact between universities and the public calls for higher education to serve as a foundational support for vocational education. Now I'm going to stop now. Your dean wanted me to make a claim in a different way, but I want to make a point. This compact is long-standing. The Lady Margaret Professorship Endowment at Cambridge University supported theological training for clergy. Here in the United States, the founding of Harvard in 1636, William and Mary in 1693, Yale in 1701, Princeton in 1746, and Dartmouth were linked to the preparation of ministers and Christian missionaries. Benjamin Franklin founded the University of Pennsylvania in 1740 with the aim to educate leaders in commerce, government, and public service. The Morrill Acts of 1864 and 1890 supported the creation of land-grant universities for the purposes of promoting the liberal and practical education of the industrial classes, my emphasis, with a focus on a pursuit of professions over their life course without exclusion of other scientific and classical studies, including military tactic. The acts emphasized the importance of agriculture and the mechanical arts. These acts cemented the compact between universities and the economic advancement of the state. We can't divorce ourselves from that. So take that away. That's something we have to deal with. Second, and my second point is that there has been an expectation, this compact, if you will, that higher education and its knowledge producers, faculty members, and those in mentorship roles with the faculty, graduate students, will engage in original research and, where appropriate, support the application of this knowledge in a fashion consistent with advancing the public good. I learned this firsthand during my tenure at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The Wisconsin idea permeated the campus culture. The genesis of the Wisconsin idea is credited to the former UW president, Charles Van Hise, who in a 1905 speech stated, "I shall never be content until the influence of the university reaches every family of the state." Altruism, humanitarianism, these aims guide many universities today and capture the view of the compact held by most. The public good is central to the compact. We can't separate from that. Just like we can't separate from the vocational aspect of higher ed, we can't separate from the public good aspect. Third, the compact to support the public good presents as a tension in a society with competing values and where individuals operate with different worldviews. I submit this tension manifests in how we think about knowledge, graduate education, and the preparation of the next generation of citizen scholars. Some background on graduate education is warranted. So let's take a closer look at graduate education. I'm going to build off of the work of Michael Nettles and his colleague Catherine Millott to make a case. This is their model, just modified for today's conversation. It's very student-centric in what it does. And they say at the PhD level, and I think it even applies to the master's students as well, that the student experience is guided by the constructs that are laid out there. I will highlight only a few because your dean has only allowed me 40 minutes to speak with you. And And those that I will highlight include the financial piece, some aspects of socialization, mentors, peers, academic and social interaction with faculty. The model is far more expansive than just the student-centered. They also deal with what happens prior to arrival to graduate school. We call those distal factors, things that happen before you arrive. I can't deal with everything today, but I would like to deal with race, ethnicity, and SES. And I also like to deal with the admissions attributes that might be important to you here in Arizona. And of course, at an academic institution like Arizona State University, we want to deal with academic productivity, or what we might call research productivity. And those will be the focus of the matter, the components I will take from the model that was put forward. First, I want to say that universities are called to be inventors. And if we look at what happens with inventions, we can actually look at what children, where they're born, and then who actually becomes inventors. This is the work of Raj Chetty and his colleagues at Harvard. I think he's at Stanford now, where he goes back and forth between Harvard and Stanford. You know how that corridor works. But the reality is, the dark blue is where you'll see the largest number of inventors per 1,000 children. And if we think about this, and it's extremely important for me to highlight it, the North and the East have a high density of individuals who are counted as inventors. And then if you look at the South, in the Southeast and Southwest, there's a low density of inventors if we think about where children are born. In the West, where you are, it's a mixed story in terms of the density. Now, I'm going to say to you, first of all, that the South and the Southeast is the fastest growing population in the United States. And if we're going to actually continue a great momentum, we're going to have to do something about including this population in the skill development, the undergraduate education and the graduate education required to maintain our status as being first rate in terms of new discoveries. And I will submit to you, as you go west, the unevenness here has to be addressed. So you might say, what is this guy getting ready to do to us? Well, I'm getting ready to go to my origins of my work. And I'm going to talk about Arizona just for a bit. And this is the percent of Hispanic students in school districts in Arizona. Now remember, right now I'm dealing with distal factors. These things happen before they get to grad school. These are just kids in your school districts. And this is how they're spread out. Does anybody have a phone? Is Siri working in here? Ask Siri, what is the weather in Arizona? Thank you. I will repeat what Siri said. The weather in Phoenix was partly cloudy. Siri did not give you a weather report for the state of Arizona. Do you know why? Because Siri is smart. No one needs the weather report for the state of Arizona. You need local weather reports. And if you're driving through Arizona, you want the local weather report for everywhere you're going to drive. It's the same thing with academic performance. You need to know the weather report or the academic performance everywhere the kids are. So I'm going to share with you some work that one of my PhD students did. They used something called a GWR, or geographically weighted regression. And that model does nothing but what Siri just did, but tell you the local weather report. And her name is Lindsay Schultz, shouting out Lindsay, in case she's watching, because she's no longer a graduate student, she's a postdoc, but she did great work. And what she wanted to do in her dissertation was to determine, based upon your state laws, it says to attend Arizona State University on your website, I looked at it before I got here, that you need Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, pardon me, no you don't. You need a 24 in the ACT in math, or 560 on the SAT, but they'll take that, or they'll take whether you take Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 in an advanced math class. You have to do one or the other. You have to have one of those. But you're not going to get a 24 in the ACT unless you've had Algebra 2 or better. I can tell you that now. I'm in math ed. It doesn't happen. And so you need advanced math courses. And what she did was to look at the number of advanced math courses that students actually had access to. By advanced math, it was Algebra 2 or better, and that means trigonometry, pre-calculus, and calculus. And she ran an analysis using Hispanic students, because that's what we talked about. That was a group that had historically been underserved in mathematics. And she wanted to show whether or not there was a relationship between Hispanic students within schools and the number of higher mathematics courses offered in the state of Arizona. And what she found was there is a relationship. These are the R squares for it, and obviously the darker they are, the higher the R squares. But where it was significant, and the big finding she had, was there were significant betas in Phoenix and Tucson. And in fact, this is where you actually had access to taking these higher level math courses. But the more you spread out around the state, in the rural areas where there were a higher population of Hispanic students, the less opportunity you had to learn the higher level math. That's a huge deal, because we still require the GRE to enter graduate school. And on the GRE, there's a math section. And that math section mirrors the ACT or the SAT section. They're very similar. Point of fact, if we thought about Arizona, now remember, there's a mixed bag out here going on with respect to discovery and new inventions. And now, what I'm trying to show you is that access to the types of skill sets that you need in order to actually matriculate so that you might be able to engage in new inventions is not evenly distributed. It's really unfair. This is a huge problem. This doesn't just exist in Arizona. Take every single state, where I'm from, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, just look at the whole South that I talked about before, and ask yourself, if this is happening at scale, who is going to go to grad school? We already know who's going to go. SES is the biggest predictor of who gets admitted to a PhD program over any other factor. So we already have that embedded. We're not accessible. Remember, the compact says every single family should be touched. Every single family in the state. I can tell you now, it's not even feasible in this state at this point. So I want to focus a bit on this access in the GRE and some things that I've learned as being graduate dean over the last few years at Washington University. We informed our colleagues that the GRE was not a graduate school requirement, that the GRE was never passed as a graduate school requirement by our graduate council. In point of fact, it was a cultural norm that existed in departments. It had nothing to do with any graduate dean that preceded me. So we became GRE optional at the graduate school level and allowed it to be programmatic. Programs could decide what they wanted to do. Now, I should say, I know that in many places, the GRE has no predictive value or very little predictive value on finishing a PhD. That said, I want to share with you some things that happened. If the numbers don't add up right, don't think I can't add. If you look on the outside of these donuts, that's the total number of students. These are the people who recently applied to Washington University. This is proprietary data, as they say. And if you look at it, you can count, and if you go around, those numbers on the outside will add up to 100. Because those are the percentage of people who applied. Inside are the people who were admitted. And this is what they said to us. So you can see the grayscale says they would not have applied if we had had they would have applied no matter what the GRE requirement was. Some said that no GRE requirement had some factor, and others said it was a large factor in them applying, that we did not have a GRE requirement. And if you look at it by the types of individuals who apply, international students, it had very little impact on whether they would apply or not. And even those who accepted, it was even smaller impact. The same for non-underrepresented minorities and unknown, not a very big impact. But when we went to underrepresented minorities, for the total pool, 40% said it had a big influence on them applying. And for those accepted to the university, 53% said it had a huge impact on them applying. It matters. Just that symbolism matters. And I will say this and submit to you that what's frustrating to me is that the biggest predictor for success in graduate school is, did you do undergraduate research in the field that you're working in? So in the STEM fields, did you do it in biology? Did you work in engineering, undergraduate research? Because they know you can work in the lab. Similarly with humanities students who do undergraduate honors theses and things of that sort. We could figure out who could do well in graduate school without the GRE. We just don't want to. And it's having a disproportionate impact, and it will have a disproportionate impact here in Arizona on you. There are programs that are building bridges that disrupt past practice culturally around the GRE. Fisk University and Vanderbilt University have already organized an amazing program in physics and STEM fields where they're not requiring a GRE. They're just having the students do undergraduate research at Fisk along with Vanderbilt faculty. They are telling me in their papers that people who would have scored maybe in the 30th or 40th percentile in the GRE are publishing in the top journals in physics. It does not predict whether you can be creative and innovative in the lab, but yet we still use it. We have to disrupt that thinking. It's extremely important. Why is it important to disrupt the thinking? You might say, that's just a zealot up there, some kind of social justice advocate who doesn't care about numbers. Actually, I really care about numbers. I'm a math educator and an epidemiologist. That's why I know that this stuff doesn't work, but that's another story. But it's causing people to lose confidence in us. And let me talk about the confidence that's happening to us in higher education. A recent study by the AAU, the American Association for Universities, began looking at this whole issue of confidence. One of the issues, and remember one of the metrics I talked about, was funding for graduate students. Well, funding in general is a big issue for us. And the AAU found, when they asked the people they surveyed, which is the most important area for the government to provide funding, greatest medical systems, you know, they talked about banks, public schools. Colleges and universities were down there. And only about 4% of the people felt like, hey, we should be funding colleges and universities. If you're not disturbed by that finding, you're not breathing. And you really don't care about higher education. They don't understand the compact. People who said we were on the right track, they said things like, I think they're trying to do the very best that they can. They're enthusiastic about what they're doing. They focus on the facts, evidence, and proof. They focus on the future, incredible discoveries. This is somebody who gets the compact. They're providing educated workers, the compact, alive again, who will contribute well to well-paying jobs and improve the economy. American universities attract the best and the brightest students from around the world in leading research and development activities, technological innovation. That's somebody that understands the compact. They're providing education that is by far the very best. But people who said we were on the wrong track, they said they're too liberal, they eliminate free speech, they don't let people express what they're doing or their feelings, they're going the wrong way, the tuition costs too much, they believe that universities are money-driven instead of focusing on students, they think that we're no longer a place to come to give a variety of viewpoints, it's not affordable. This theme is powerful. It suggests that people feel as though we're not aligned with the compact. Many of the phrases and words that people use to describe different companies were provided in the AAU study and how they described leading research universities, which Arizona State University is one of them. But maybe you don't fall in these categories, and I think that's a great thing for you. But a lot of it is about expense. They also think we're very innovative. Many people think we're too liberal or they're not sure. They think we do a great job dealing with national security. Some think we're out of touch. A lot think we're not accessible or they're not sure if we're accessible. They don't know if we're careful with their money. That's painful. the percentage of individuals who have a great deal of confidence in institutions they have confidence in were the military, small businesses, the police, below 50% on organized religion, all the way down. And when you look at the data, higher education at least was at 48%. You know, I mean, I guess that's the good story. I mean, at least we're not television news. When you break it down in bipartisan ways to try to get at the data, the U.S. population was the data I just showed you, but you see a definite changes in a negative in just a 3-year period. Across political groups, whether Republicans, Independents, or Democrats, the confidence in higher education was down. And it was down largest with Republicans. This is a very serious matter. People don't, they're losing confidence. In 3 years, to lose 17% confidence, that's huge. That's a perception issue that's extremely problematic. The compact is at risk. A majority of Americans are saying that we're going in the wrong direction. This is a Pew survey. It's sort of triangulating the data, if you will. 61% say that higher education is going in the wrong direction. It goes to 73% if you go Republicans or they lean Republican, and it's still a majority if it's a Democrat. In other words, it's a bipartisan viewpoint that we're moving in the wrong direction. And I'm going to submit to you the reason is we don't talk about the compact. We're not transparent about what it is and what we're engaged in and why we're engaged in it. Again, vast divide on reasons behind the negative views. A lot of it is cost. Republicans and Democrats saying it costs too much. Students are not getting the skills they need to succeed. That whole career and vocational piece, it's not popping across the aisle in many respects. People don't see us as doing that and engaged in it. Too much concern about protecting students from views they might not find, that they might find offensive. You know, that thing that everybody's been worried on, you know, I won't go there right now. I'm being lying. I won't go there. Professors are bringing their own political views. There's a concern largely among Republicans on that. So that's tough news. What are we going to do? You know, most of us, whether we're in the AAU or not, measure our success not by public perception, but by the metrics that are associated with the AAU. If you're in the AAU, you're constantly counting where you are because you don't want to be out of it. And if you're not in the AAU, you're constantly counting where you are because you might want to be a part of it or at least view yourself as making progress on the metrics we all agree are important. Now, we tend not to deal with the public perception metrics. We tend to deal with this set of metrics that I'm going to provide you. And I think that's extremely important. I think it's great. I'm not opposed to it. You're familiar with all the metrics. Everybody in the room knows about competitive federal funding, you know, whether your membership in the National Academy or not, in terms of your faculty, the faculty awards, fellowship status, memberships, and of course the citation of our outstanding faculty members matters a great deal. So it doesn't matter whether you're in the AAU or not. That's how we measure ourselves. Notice that, well, I don't want to steal it, but none of these metrics really deal with the fact that the public doesn't really perceive us in an appropriate way. We also care, you know, about our funding that's not from competitive scenarios because it does fund us. So we measure that. We, of course, measure doctoral education, how many PhDs are produced at the institution used to be a point of pride and the like, extremely important point of pride. I could talk about the glut of the PhD, but I won't today because that wasn't my charge per se. But we also deal with the number of postdoc appointees and, to a smaller extent, undergraduate education, which is harder to measure. Everybody is concerned about this. But you know what? You know what I'm really concerned about? I'm really concerned about how many disruptors you produce. How many people do you produce that are going to disrupt what's happening in society? And I think the importance of disruption should be what we're about. And if we can make that case, I think we can make the case with our constituents who support us, and they'll understand we're serious about the compact. So what do I mean about disruption? I don't really like this graphic. It was in a cartoon last week. This cartoonist was attempting to disrupt something that's happening across the globe. The United Nations reported that measles has increased by 300% in a one-year period across the globe. Stunning finding. It had largely been gone, and now it's back. And I can't tell you how many maladies have returned as a result of folks not receiving vaccinations. And I don't think this is the proper way to disrupt. I think we have to do something a little different. And my colleague at Washington University wrote a book called Between Hope and Fear, The History of Vaccines and Human Immunity. And it is the very best of taking social science, history, and medical science and making a case about why vaccination is important. And he's done his very best to go around the country to make strong cases in states that are trying to change laws related to school vaccination, which is our big protector, because we have said on the front end that students could not come into our public schools unless they had been vaccinated, but many people are trying to change the laws, and he's using the very best of science to try to disrupt these patterns. That's what we need to be doing. That's the compact. That's the Wisconsin ideal. That's touching and making a difference for every single family. It's everything. It's what we ought to be doing in every way. Some years ago, I wrote an article while I was at the University of Wisconsin, and I made the case that I was deeply concerned about the use of mathematical models and artificial intelligence in making decisions about who could go on and off various medical procedures. It was being mathematized is the way I described it. And I'll be honest with you, my colleagues at Wisconsin who were then somewhat critical of my ideas, they didn't think it was feasible in 1994 that these kinds of things could happen. Many laughed and thought it was a joke, and he couldn't be serious. Fortunately, I still got it published. And off and on, since that time, I've wondered what would happen. And more recently, my mind turned to a book that just unfolded by Virginia Eubanks. It's titled Automating Inequality. I highly recommend it to all of you. She presents the findings describing how high-tech sorting systems monitor and police the poor in human services, including our temporary assistance to needy family programs, supplemental nutrition assistance programs, and Medicaid in Indiana, homeless services in Los Angeles, and child welfare in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Computer algorithms negatively influencing the lives across diverse geographic regions. Technology's influence extends to the criminal justice system. Michelle Alexander, in a recent New York Times, wrote a frightening piece about incarceration policies in California, New Jersey, and New York, using mathematical models to generate risk assessment for judges to inform their decisions related to the release from the criminal justice system. She stated, colorblind on the surface, they are based on factors that are not only highly correlated with race and class, but also significantly influenced by pervasive bias in the criminal justice system. The country of Estonia is currently contemplating eliminating their lower courts to use AI to decide cases. It's actually happening. Legislative bodies influencing our health, human services, and criminal justice systems across the world require algorithmic justice. Today, computer algorithms represent the front line of the new tools of gerrymandering with respect to voting. The value of the vote is being shaped by these AI models in the information version of the poll tax and literacy tests. Civil rights leader Robert Moses argued that math and science literacy represented the new content for citizenship. He was correct. And why do I say all of that? Because the compact requires us to respond to these types of challenges. Optimization of systems without real understanding of what's in the black box, without any engagement at the graduate level about what we're doing, is a dangerous thing. I want to just submit, we really don't even have programs designed today to prepare people to analyze and look at these problems. We have people who can create them, AI, but not the people who can understand the ethics undergirding them, the history and use of them, etc. They don't exist. It's in our imagination. It's going to require interdisciplinarity at a level that we've never seen before. But I want to submit to you that there are some graduate students who are disrupting. I'm going to provide a few from WashU and from Arizona State as examples. This is Justin Phillips. He is amazing. He was one of our MPH students and just recently won a National Poetry Award for his poetry that really laid out how injustice was unfolding in society in unique ways. He didn't just write poetry for people to read. He wrote poetry for people to do something different. A few others who are amazing to me. Anita was an MD, PhD student in anthropology, and she's doing work in Guatemala on women's experiences dealing with cervical cancer to help prevent and to treat. She combined her MD and PhD program, and she needed both the anthropological skills and the medical science skills to be able to do the work she was doing. You have Scott Mitchell. He was unique. He actually combined an architecture degree with a coding degree so that he could make buildings safer. An amazing combination because most architects don't do the coding and most coders don't do the architecture. But he figured out a way to do both. An amazing young man. Nicole was a JD MSW student who, while she was working on both degrees, started an immigration policy and law practice right in our city to engage that in the state of Missouri. An amazing practice, and she wasn't satisfied with just taking courses for credit. She wanted to apply it immediately to social situations and make a difference. And then Megan Greathouse was a veteran who came to us and helped build a pathways for veterans to continue their education at Washington University. She's now in corporate America, but what she did as a student, taking seriously the governance processes and the financial need of veterans, was amazing. These students are disruptors. They represent the very best of what graduate education has to offer. Well, Adam, who I couldn't, when I read about it, I just thought it was amazing. He's one of yours. He's a PhD student who's working in civil, environmental, and sustainable engineering, and he's working on opioid overdoses and creating models to help eliminate that from happening in real context. An amazing situation. He's not the only one here. I've got many examples. Rebecca Cook, who's working on work to destroy brain tumor cells using scorpion toxins, a PhD student in your School of Biological and Health System Sciences. And there's Dante, another graduate student who is working on theater as intervention, helping people to understand, using the arts, about social injustice and helping them to act upon it. I think this is amazing, but we don't measure any of this. We don't keep it. You won't get into the AAU by documenting this. But it's a huge, huge difference in terms of what's happening in our society. We ought to be talking about this. Society thinks we're not engaged in this kind of work. They don't understand it. If you looked at the voting or the perceptions of how we are in the voting that happened in those polls, they don't know about these students and what they're doing. Your dean could have given me 100 examples of like this from your university, and they were all around in posters right now. I could give you the same from Washington University, and we could go all across the United States and give examples like this. But people don't know, largely because at the graduate level, and this is extremely important for me to highlight, we tend to say student, and we mean undergraduates. We don't ever think about the graduate and professional student as being the student. And these individuals are the ones who are engaged in the discovery process at scale. It's amazing and extremely important. I'm going to say this to you. There are two kinds of universities in the United States, and there are only two. And you might think, I'm going to say there's the AAU universities and the non-AAU universities. But that's not what I'm going to say. There's just two types. There are the do's and the don'ts. Let me explain to you first the do's. I'm just going to I have 5 minutes? Oh, man, I'm living right. You don't know how much of this speech I cut. The do's, just take DO. These are places that you can go and you can discover the opportunities of your future. They're inclusive and they're expansive in who they allow in. They are the Arizona State universities of the world. They're the DO universities. And at the DO universities, if you flip it, OD, you have opportunity to discover and innovate in ways that are both disciplinary and interdisciplinary, that are impactful and engage your ingenuity at the highest level. These are the DO universities. And the don't universities, they're simply known by who they exclude. That's it. If they disappeared tomorrow, as long as we have the DO universities, America will be fine. And count them. You can count the number of people. I've done it before I got here. If we just eliminated all the don'ts and just had you and all the others who are in the DO business, we'd be just fine. Now, what does that mean? That means one thing for me, and this your 80th anniversary. You need to keep doing what you're doing, but you also need to do one other thing. You need to let other people know what you're doing. Because we can't continue with the perceptions that exist. We're doing a lot. And the don'ts seem to get all the money. But it really is about you. So thank you. Now I can take questions. And I did cut a lot of the speech because I was told I was going to talk to you about 60 minutes, but Alfredo and I agreed to 40, so I cut a lot out. And the big part I cut out that I'll just say, we talked about it this morning, was that if you looked at the trends of PhD education from the time it started, I should say with Yale in the first PhD program, about 50 years later, there were about 24 PhD programs, and then over time, it's 500 PhD programs by the year 2000. You know, almost every public university now offers a PhD program. It's massive in terms of it. And master's education accelerated at an even faster rate.